Jodie Whittaker broke the glass ceiling, becoming the first woman to play the Doctor. And whilst her era may have been disturbed by a global pandemic, I truly believe the Whittaker and the Chibnall era produced some exceptional stories throughout their 4-year run. As I rank all her adventures, similar to the Sixth Doctor, I will be ranking Flux's 6 individual episodes as their own stories. All 6 episodes are uniquely distinct from one another despite being one story, and they do all wildly vary in quality, so I think it's fair to rank them individually. So, for one last time, let's rank all of the 13th Doctor stories. At the bottom of the barrel, we have number 29, Orphan 55, an episode that encompasses everything that is wrong with cramming so much into 45 minutes. Orphan 55 is fit to burst, and the fact that it jumps from one set piece to another, with barely any time to breathe or think, makes this the worst story of the 13th Doctor era. The idea of this holiday park being a simulation to protect humanity from its true nature is a great idea, but the episode itself just does nothing with the twist. And therein lies the problem. The idea of this being Earth ravaged by climate change shouldn't have been the twist, it should have been the premise, or at least spread this across 2 episodes to give this story time to develop and have its twist mean something. Instead, we just get a sloppily placed together epilogue about how climate change will doom us all, but it's not in aid of anything to the story. Top that off with an underused TARDIS team and trying to establish a supporting cast for the week. Orphan 55 is all the worst traits of the 13th Doctor era just packed into one. Number 28, The Battle of Ranskoor Av Kolos. I appreciate Chibnall for trying to make Series 11 more standalone episodes, but you definitely needed to have something that ended more with a bang for this finale. The characters are completely underexplored, the Uks flip their beliefs far too easily, the sniper bots are said to be a huge threat, but since their first appearance they easily get shot down, and the return of Tim Shaw just fails to make any impact, unlike his first appearance did. Additionally, the episode's world building is just completely ignored, with the protagonists facing no consequences for breaking them. For example, the neural balancers. The Doctor says they can't survive without them on, because the planet is psychic and will attack their minds, but when she and Yaz decide to give someone else their neural dampeners, nothing seems to happen. Chris Chibnall even confirmed in an interview that this finale was a first draft, and oh boy does it feel like that. The Series 11 finale is everything Doctor Who shouldn't be, boring, bland and lifeless. This episode is the equivalent of carrying an already big package down a flight of stairs and piling more on top and looking surprised when it falls flat on its arse in a tumble. The division elements make zero impact in the story because it feels so lifeless and empty. They're lazy, boring, predictable and just rubbish. The division is just that. Tecteun is just that. They're just evil, that's it. And it's hard to care for Tecteun as a villain or a protagonist in her own story because we've never met this character before, only learned about her in the finale last year. So do you care when she's got rid of or the connection she has to the Doctor? No, because the only reason she's killed is for dramatic shock, so she can't answer any questions. Why is she so obsessed with the Doctor? Why does she want the Doctor back for Division when they cause so much trouble for her and them? Why on earth should we all care? I guess that doesn't matter. Top that off with the Grand Serpent infiltrating unit since the early days, which does nothing for me other than add further confusion to the unit timeline. Everything here feels so much is happening, but nothing is being said. And despite the conviction of the cast, the episode feels like a huge exposition dump before the finale, which I could forgive if the finale was a bit better, but we will get to that. This stands as the worst segment of the Flux season by a wide margin. Number 26. Arachnids in the UK. Quite possibly the most meh story of Series 11, as I don't have much strong feelings to this episode either way. The scenes near the beginning with Graham going to his house without Grace is really well handled, and generally some of the most emotional stuff in televised Doctor Who. Bradley Walsh has the perfect eyes for those sombre and quiet moments, and the whole scene is aided by Sega Nakanola's great score, which is excellent throughout the episode as well. VFX on the spiders is also very good, and maybe the best a creature or monster in Doctor Who that has ever looked this scary in my opinion. Overall, the first act is pretty good, and it's a shame that the rest of the episode can't continue in the same calibre. I admire the Doctor for referring to the spiders as beautiful creatures, but this is later contradicted when she just lets them suffocate slowly and in agony, which goes against what the episode was going for. Overall, Arachnids in the UK has decent ideas, but doesn't work as a whole, and just feels like a flaccid experience. Number 25. Vanquishers. It's a standalone episode, it's okay. like, okay, but a minute after it, you'll just shrug off and probably won't bother to remember it for the rest of your day. Okay. Not exactly a good sign for a series finale, particularly something like Flux as well. There's a lot of good character moments in here, like the three Doctors interaction, especially with Time and Grand Serpent as well. Jericho gets a nice send-off, and it's great that he gets a good and heroic moment. The Carvinista's fate is pretty sad as well. You feel bad for all the Lupari. Splitting the Doctor into three is a good idea, and in an easy way at least helps to solve the multiple plots. Some may say it's a cop-up. I'd rather have that than companions suddenly becoming highly capable, practically a Doctor surrogate. Swarm and Azure are probably really cool looking villains since we've had in the revived series, but they turn out to be quite a dud. There's no clear reason why the Division let them loose in the first place when they know how strong they both are. Not to mention, if the Division/Tecteun are the ones that created Flux, their function is kind of annulled anyway. Azure said they're imprisoned and feeling their death in a loop, so what's the whole thing about the couple and the beacon in the Arctic Circle? So, to summarise, The Vanquishers is a pretty good standalone episode, but as a finale, it is very lacking. Number 24. Legend of the Sea Devils. Yep, it exists. Number 23. The Saranga Conundrum. Ask me what I thought of this episode when it first aired. I would have had it at the bottom of Series 11, but over the years it has improved for me that I can call this okay. In my humble opinion, it is hardly more than that, and if it does get a little pedestrian in places, there is plenty happening in the myriad of plots to keep the interest focused and the surprises coming. I'm still confused about the title though. Perhaps the conundrum is how the 5 different narrative threads belong together in the same episode. It is overstuffed to allow all this to come together as one, but for being perfectly fine, the Saranga Conundrum is a vanilla slice of the 13th Doctor era. Number 22. Praxeus. Okay, now we're into the episodes I can start calling good. An ambitious, expensive, and necessary exercise, writer Pete McTighe manages something rather miraculous. He does give all 3 companions a great deal to do, while still making the Doctor the hero and star of the show. Graham gets to tug on the heartstrings in a way that only Bradley Walsh can, and it shows just how little this gentle coaxing of sentiment this character has been utilised in Series 12. Mind you, there has been so much going on, it has left little time for character pauses, so this is a treat. There's a nicely drawn gay romance that doesn't feel in any way exploitative or cliched, and that's a pretty minor miracle. The moment where it looks like one of the guys is going to die at the ending, my heart was on my mouth, and I don't want to feel that way about characters I've only just met. But it's a really effective regardless. This is essentially a meat and potatoes episode of Doctor Who rather than one of the big hitters, but there is so much happening here that it goes to show just that even the filler episodes are packed with quite a bit of gold. Gorgeous location work that gets the pulse racing, with exciting set pieces, another great score from Sega Nakanola, a number of very creepy scenes in a series that has found the scares again, and has a feeling that the 13th Doctor can whip up a gang of friends in a heartbeat just through her sheer likeability. A meat and potatoes episode of the 13th Doctor era. Number 21. Once Upon Time. Personally, I think Once Upon Time is good. It has a very high concept idea, and it has moments of greatness, mostly coming from the Doctor herself, but it does kind of feel like a pit stop from the main plot. There is no flux at all really, and it reintroduces a plot thread from last year which wasn't entirely popular with fans. However, I do admire Chibnall greatly for dedicating a whole episode to resolving a cliffhanger and giving further insights into characters' history like Yaz, Dan and Vinda. Once Upon Time is a unique experiment within the series' history, and it does reward repeat viewings. I only wish it was more coherent and had a broader impact within the whole of Flux. Number 20. The Halloween Apocalypse. Created during a global pandemic, we had the right to fear that Doctor Who might not make it to our screens in 2021, and in defiance of expectation, Chris Chibnall instead chooses to weaponise the limitations set on him. We can't have an unlimited amount of actors? Fine, we'll have a guest cast that feature throughout, and as a result we get to luxuriate with those characters and really get to know them. We can't film abroad? Fine. Chris Chibnall chooses his location filming wisely, and instead takes us on a whirlwind tour of the universe to a diverse, weird, and visually stunning number of CGI vistas. Can't have an entire season of Doctor Who because of the COVID restrictions? That's okay then. Chibnall leans into his previous successes of heavily serialised television and creates the longest running, structurally ambitious and fluid piece of long-form storytelling we've seen in Doctor Who for a while. There was plenty here that was set up with no payoff, but the scenes themselves were great set pieces, like the Angel attack, Diane being pulled into the house. Dan is introduced with great economy and clarity and likability, and immediately fits the series' new cosmic fantasy tone, and there is real enjoyment to be had with the Doctor and Yaz pairing that had previously been hidden to this extent. You'll find the usual Chris Chibnall exposition here, and that's just an aberration in his work, and you can either tolerate it or not, and you'll either like it or just find it overstuffed. For being a good start to Series 13, the Halloween Apocalypse just about makes it to the top 20. Number 19. The Ghost Monument. Lots of nice details and moments, but not too heavy on plot. Challenging plot details need to be added because this was a perfectly serviceable runaround, but it had a plot as light as the opening episode, and it lacked the excuse of having to set up the main characters. As a result, it does feature quite a lot of very good character moments that explored the new dynamics and gave the guest actors plenty to work with, but I can't pretend at any point I was particularly surprised or engaged with what they were going through. Chibnall simply presents his ideas straight up with no ambiguity or ability to surprise. A planet that moves, a space race, a ghost monument, a missing TARDIS, deadly water, sentient tea towels. These are all decent ideas that are worth building up, but the Doctor and her companions just hop from one set piece to the next, with the endgame something that is spelt out since the start. Countering that you have two brilliant guest characters, very well played with interesting backstories, and this is an excellent chance to see the regulars gel, for Jodie Whittaker to take charge of the series through some moments of danger, and for Graham, Ryan and Yaz to step into peril and still want to move on at the ending. It would be remiss of me to fail to mention how beautiful this episode looks, and the lengths that the production team have gone to ensure that this show matches with current day TV. The cinematography is phenomenal, the direction stylish, and the score refreshingly unhysterical and atmospheric. I like the Ghost Monument, but there were moments where I was clock watching between all the decent character beats, and for that it's perfectly good. Number 18. Eve of the Daleks. I appreciate this New Year special for its placing after the events of Flux, in how it's much of a smaller scale character piece trying to escape the Daleks in a setting as mundane as a storage unit, as opposed to the universe-ending threat we got in Flux. The time loop plot is handled very well and keeps you engaged enough to keep watching, and the Daleks, like in all their appearances in the Chibnall era, are very well characterised. They're blunt, ruthless, to the point, and always answer back. They're just so funny for me to watch. Add to that the TARDIS crew all get time to shine, with Phasmin being officially confirmed, and I appreciate how it's integrated into the story. Dan notices that Yaz loves the Doctor romantically, and given that Diane in the previous series didn't want to pursue a relationship with Dan due to her trauma, it makes sense from Dan's perspective why he'd urge Yaz to tell the Doctor how she feels, as life is too short. It is really well handled. However, the romance between Sarah and Nick doesn't quite work for me and comes across as more stalkerish than anything else. Nevertheless, for being a self-contained story filled with time and love, Eve of the Daleks caps off Chibnall's Dalek trilogy in a lot of style. Number 17. The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Pretty enjoyable for the most part, even if it is a little thin on plot. The big shout out for me is Jodie Whittaker's Doctor. The simple fact of the matter is, I just find her a delight in her debut, easing herself into the role confidently, effortlessly connecting the audience with moments of silliness and authority, and assembling a bright new team to join her on her adventures. The dialogue feels more functional and less stylized than we are used to than previous showrunner eras, as it's much more realistic. There simply isn't much story here to speak of, but is merely dressing in order to bring these characters together into a functioning unit, and on those terms it does its job pretty well. It's like somebody has taken a musty old cellar that is obsessed with relics and opened the windows and let sunlight and fresh air. With a refreshing new Doctor and a warm family to travel the universe with, and what looks like a serial developing, the show has gone more or less back to its familial roots, but brought itself bang up to date with 2018. It's a promising approach and started the 13th Doctor's tenure very well in my opinion. Number 16. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. A terrifically entertaining character tale with great monsters, plenty of action, and a chance for Jodie Whittaker to show off what she can do. This is a history lesson set during the 1920s, and that is a pitch that pretty much any series would die for. Nikola Tesla is a remarkably vivid character, expertly played and written with enough detail so you feel if you've learnt a lot about him, but with no time to sketch him in a terrific depth so you can pop off to the land of the internet and find out more. Doctor Who is at its best when it inspires you to ask questions and to discover the historical characters that we meet, whilst also entertaining you at the same time. The monsters are pretty generic, but they're outstandingly realised, and the action at the climax was really exciting. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror is a great example of what the show does so well in Series 12 in my opinion. Realised locations, a great sense of fun, surprises, terrific action, and a brilliantly written Doctor, and the results are a glorious piece of Doctor Who that feels utterly traditional, but trendy and smart at the same time. Number 15. Revolution of the Daleks. There's so much going on here, and some things are handled with real dexterity, and other things don't quite come together, but the overall piece is full of fun, energy, excitement, and emotion. It's a thrilling ride with some awesome set pieces, and a chance to see this set of regulars have one last exciting adventure against the Daleks. It starts out as a political thriller using the Dalek blueprint in a pretty intriguing way, and those were some of the best scenes because the latter half becomes an 80s tale with Daleks' civil war coming to Earth, albeit with an enormous budget to make the devastating war look pretty spectacular. Jodie Whittaker waltzed through this story with confidence, intelligence, and has a commanding presence. The Doctor gets so many opportunities to strut her stuff in the latter half of this episode, confronting the villain of the piece, standing up to the Daleks, formulating a frankly insane and terrifying plan, conniving a plan where she gets to spit bile at the racially geared Daleks and trick them in the process. In moments of introspection and a devastated reaction to losing friends at the ending, Jodie Whittaker is loving playing the Doctor, and she's utterly compelling to watch. Captain Jack is back and as much fun as ever, not taking over too much as he would be, but he is a warm addition to this TARDIS team. Chris Noth returns as Robertson and plays a slimy, camp and occasionally bonkers villain, and he's really entertaining to watch, and the character moments for Ryan and Yaz are some of the best scripted moments for this TARDIS team since they joined the show. The pacing and direction are occasionally off-key, but the overall effect is that of an overstuffed delight with lots of memorable scenes. Huge kudos for the moment the Daleks all fly into the TARDIS. The last 10 minutes are really good as well, with two companions choosing to leave the Doctor rather than being forced out through some dreadful science fiction hoops to be forced out of the TARDIS. This story might not feature Graham and Ryan as you might have thought, but their last scene together is really well handled. Revolution of the Daleks isn't perfect, but it kept me highly entertained throughout. Number 14. Can You Hear Me? This episode is to this TARDIS team to what Fragments was to Torchwood. Can You Hear Me marks a turning point for Yaz, Graham and Ryan in a huge way. How this episode fools you into thinking it's going to be all about people's phobias and then winds up saying something profound about mental health in general and how we need to talk is pretty impressive for a family show. With racism, environmentalism and mental health under his tenure, Chris Chibnall isn't afraid to make the show about something whilst also entertaining you. Can You Hear Me has a real punch to it because of its character work. It's the most accomplished character piece in a while, especially when it comes to the main regulars. The plot works extremely well to a point, but ultimately it is wrapped up with a little too easy of a ceremony, and to its detriment to allow for the 10-minute epilogue, which is where all the striking material is. Mandip Gill is astonishingly good in an episode that is feeling like it's really showing her off, and the rest of the regulars aren't too far behind either in terms of greatness. The Doctor is still a weird, quirky, awkward alien having adventures and trying to keep herself together in the knowledge that her planet has gone up in flames, but her companions feel like real people, struggling, asking questions about their existence and coming to terms with the demons of their past. They feel so much more real to me now after I've watched Can You Hear Me? Stunningly realised and acted. Watched this more than once and it does benefit several viewings. Number 13. Ascension of the Cybermen and the Timeless Children. The finale that looked at Hellbent and decreed I'm the most controversial series finale. Ascension of the Cybermen is a gripping and lead into the finale. It's a story that brings some real muscle and monstrousness back to the Cybermen in a way that reminds us of their power and destruction across the universe, which is a nice contrast to usually seeing them on the verge of extinction and desperate to survive. Ascension of the Cybermen remains a superior slice of action Who, with a palpable atmosphere and tense and stifling scenes throughout. The Doctor is neutered here to the point of learning everything but achieving nothing, and on the other hand, with the Timeless Children, the explanations given are designed to make you sit up and pay attention, or make your head explode in a non-canon defying way. The Master has never been in a more electrifying hands than Sacha Dhawan. The companions have a number of great moments, the production is out of this world, and the mysteries expanded on in The Timeless Children spin the series in a more enigmatic and optimistic direction that offers excitement and hope for the future. While it didn't really pay off that in the long run, I'm not going to cause it as a detriment against this finale. As an experience of raw emotions and revelations, it's really well handled, As an event in Doctor Who history, it's pretty unprecedented. It's the episode where the Cybermen resurrect dead Time Lords and take over Gallifrey, and that's the least impressive shockwave. It's an episode that teaches us that everything we know about the Doctor is a lie. It's the episode where the Master begs the Doctor to kill him and destroy their planet because of what he has learnt about their past. Chibnall has taken out all the toys in the box, the Doctor, the Master, Gallifrey, Regeneration, the Cybermen, and assembled them in the most twisted way imaginable. Whether this works for you or not is personal, but anybody who accused him of lacking ambition in his first season needs to bow their head in shame. I do admire the guy's guts to create something new here. He has fundamentally marked the series from this point, pleasingly offered explanations for lots of questions that were thrown into the air this season, thrown up new mysteries to be solved, and handed us developments to the mythos that is constantly being reinvented. And speaking as someone who had their past shattered shortly before this episode aired, this story helped me get through it, and it made me realise I've never been limited by the past, and neither has Doctor Who. Number 12. It Takes You Away. An episode that refuses to play by the rules, but has a fascinating look at grief and loss. It takes you away with switches tones, styles, and narratives with gleeful abandon, and yet somehow gelling into an unpredictable piece that remains touching, dramatic, suspenseful, and satisfying. Director Jamie Childs has proven to be a hell of a find here, and he has to create very three distinct worlds in this story. The crisp suspense of the Norwegian sequences, the comic book horror of the Anti-Zone nightmare, and the dreamy brightness of the Solitract plane. The episode hops from one location to the other without apology, and it's simply a case of keeping up or getting off the ride. You should hold on tight throughout because it ultimately leads to a touching confrontation between the Doctor and Graham, a breakthrough for Ryan, and that moment that everyone has been waiting for, when Jodie Whittaker cements herself as the Doctor and blows a kiss to a sentient universe that's in the shape of a talking frog. My favourite scenes were in the middle sections, the Doctor and co exploring the Anti-Zone. It does feel very classic Who, but with a real nasty streak to it, especially with the inclusion of ribbons and the flesh-eating moths. The aesthetic just looks gorgeous, and it's unlike anything you've seen before in Series 11. And that's one thing this series has done extremely well, plonking the TARDIS down in visually distinct and diverse places, truly suggesting that this show can go anywhere. In contrast to the rest of this year, however, which has very much gone down the road of telling a self-contained story with a particular feel to it, It Takes You Away takes massive joy in opening out what the possibilities of Doctor Who can be, and having the carte blanche to take you anywhere it likes. That freewheeling indulgence leads us to an insane sequence where the Doctor gets to talk to a sentient universe in the shape of a frog, a concept so out there you might think that Douglas Adams got a hold of the script from beyond the grave. It's beautifully scripted and performed, and Doctor Who has dished up far more bizarre stuff than a talking frog. I just accepted it for what it was, a playful expression of life. This doesn't have the usual climactic momentum of a penultimate episode, and proving that Series 11 really is doing its own thing. How can I possibly complain, though, when I walk away from an episode that intrigued, thrilled, baffled, and also moved me in such a unique way? It's another memorable tale, and one where Jodie Whittaker truly gets to claim the series of her own. For being the true thematic ending to Series 11, It Takes You Away will go down as a wonderfully surreal episode. Number 11. Fugitive of the Judoon. What started off as a mundane Judoon adventure turned into a huge mystery into its fabric. It threatens a huge revelation, and then it turns out to say something quite profound about the Doctor's life. Fugitive of the Judoon starts out as the most comic book adventure of the Chris Chibnall era, Judoon stomping around Gloucester, near a lagoon, and then builds and builds until it shakes the core of the entire series, and leaves the viewers with massive questions about the implications of the revelations involved. There's a broader picture emerging about Gallifrey, and the use of continuity is deployed like a weapon in the narrative to batter the audience at the appropriate moments. It shows that good storytelling will always be what makes good Doctor Who. Jodie Whittaker and Joe Martin make quite a team, and those central performances had me smiling throughout. The fugitive Doctor makes a terrific impact despite her short amount of screen time, and whilst this is a gripping watch, I feel it is let down by repeat viewings, as some of these questions are left unanswered due to behind-the-scenes issues. Nevertheless, for giving us a terrific mysterious incarnation of the Doctor, Fugitive of the Judoon is just shy of the top 10. Number 10. The Witchfinders. I love the confidence of tone that The Witchfinders has. It's a story that isn't afraid to switch between camp character comedy, historical cruelty, and quite disturbing horror. The witch trials are a subject I've long wanted Doctor Who to see, and it always felt like a subject that's rife for drama. That nasty streak that runs through this season, how it shines a light on the darker aspects of humanity, has been one of the most prevalent and powerful themes that we've had. It does us well to remember how we can be fed to fear things, and within that fear commits the most terrible of acts. Nowadays, we get to accuse and taunt people just from behind our screens, but let's not pretend that social media hate isn't a form of witch trial either. This just strips away all the devices and drops us into a period where we actually wanted to see the lethal results of our condemnation of others. Alan Cumming delivers a delightfully whimsical King James, who terrifies because he's a man who's willfully pointing the finger and committing murder whilst indulging in the drama of it all. He's enjoying the theatricalities of all the murder, the paranoia, and the episode wisely delves into why he's such a suspicious man. It really is an amazing performance. Siobhan Finneran, who offers the performance of this season as Becky Savage, is also really good. A woman consumed by her own hate and anger and accusing all and sundry to keep the suspicion away from herself. I found her a genuinely monstrous character long before her transformation. The direction of the story, all bleak and colourless, and yet focusing on unnerving imagery, feels very appropriate, and it is one of the most atmospheric scores of the year too. The only thing that really isn't time for is the alien menace. They're not really given great exploration, and so all we get is a throwaway line about their past and why they're on Earth, and it does seem a bit rushed. A shame because they are visually very frightening, and a very ghoulish element of Series 11. This is a story where the Doctor is tried as a witch, but walks every bit the heroine away from all of this, and just for that it deserves to be in the top 10. Number 9. Spyfall. A confident globe-hopping start to Series 12, Spyfall is never once pretending to be a realistic drama. It's pure escapism, and it's taking all of its characters on just a joyride. Spyfall takes everything that Chris Chibnall asks about. Bombs on planes, cars out of control, lights being on the attack, and delivers really spectacularly here. Everything has stepped up a gear. The direction is unabashedly expensive and exciting, the music is gripping, the regulars are getting on like a house on fire, but showing appropriate panic in the circumstances. The script is witty and smart, and the pre-titles and cliffhanger make not just a welcome return, but are both pretty epic. I wouldn't want every episode to be like Spyfall, but as a mission statement that the series is back, and you shouldn't get too comfortable, this is about as sunny as Doctor Who comes. Sacha Dhawan knocks it out of the park and gives me my favourite interpretation of the Master of the revived series. This Master is suffering from a form of post-traumatic stress. He's seen something so distressing that it has unhinged his mind, and he's essentially reaching out to the Doctor in the most perverse way imaginable, handing her an alien invasion and a big wacky plan to foil in order to get her attention. He wants her to know what he has discovered about their people, rather than just sit her down and tell her just isn't his way. He hates her and he wants her to suffer as well. Sacha Dhawan has moments of complete mania and sadism, and he really wants the Doctor to suffer. It's almost like he is a version of all those fans who hate this incarnation, and he's so desperate to bring her down, but yet still wants to be a part of the show and is desperately clinging for attention, trying to be a part of it. It makes it doubly satisfying when she bests him later in the episode, because his reaction of pure frustration must be how those fans feel when Jodie Whittaker owns this show in Spyfall. For opening Series 12 with a bang, Spyfall rightfully earns its place in the 13th Doctor's top 10 stories. Number 8. Kerblam. A very smart, confident episode that paints an intriguing vision of the future. It rocks up with some terrific set pieces, some great guest characters, and not a bad climax either. The twist that the people we think are the villains are the good guys and vice versa is such an old trick, but I think it's pulled off with quite remarkable effectiveness here. Its big fun name like Kerblam, this is a step away from Amazon, and I really love how the episode pokes fun at how they have fingers everywhere, and could be responsible for the most appalling acts of terror. Countering that is the fact that the suits who represent the company are actually honourable and good-hearted, and what they want best for their human workers. It's quite a balanced examination. I also like the whole humans being replaced by machines angle, which, for once this season, didn't feel like a lecture, but they're to provide some local colour, and to give the human characters an extra layer of sympathy. There's a fair amount of talk along the way, but the dialogue is punchy and fun. and there's memorable performances as well. I feel like the guest characters are being given a much better crack at the whip in this era, and more opportunities to show what they're capable of. Essentially, though, this is all a massive bundle of fun. The Doctor and Company infiltrating a Universal delivery warehouse to uncover something sinister going on. It's Doctor Who at its most idiosyncratic, while still feeling very much like the Doctor Who of old. Number 7. Resolution. A truly impressive job of bringing back the Daleks for one of their most satisfying turns in the revived series. Resolution had me on the edge of my seat on my first watch, and it still grips me today despite watching it several times now. Chris Chibnall ditches his touchy-feely approach to Doctor Who and goes for a dynamic, epic, emotive, and exciting seasonal special with plenty of chilling scenes and riveting action. If anybody thought that Series 11 was too flaccid, this is the shot of adrenaline that was needed. Everything is ratcheted up to 11 here. The direction is forceful, pacey, and unashamedly exhilarating. The music is the most in your face since the show returned, the performances of the regular cast match the severity of the threat, and the Dalek itself is a brilliant makeshift design that looks absurd and murders without any apology. Chibnall's approach to the Dalek in bringing it together piece by piece is inspired, and in doing so he achieves the impossible. He delivers a pretty original Dalek tale, and that's something that you would have thought would have been impossible at this stage in the show's history. The idea of the recon scout Dalek, the first to reach Earth and the first to leave Skaro, buried on the planet since the 9th century, and slowly bringing itself together and building a new casing, is a terrific idea. Does Resolution need the domestic scenes wedged into its running time? Would it have worked as one 45-minute episode? Probably, and whilst the scene in the cafe with Ryan and his dad does hurt the pacing a bit, I cannot deny that this material is genuinely well written, so I'm not too harsh on it. It's more than made up for by some unforgettable set pieces and moments where the series aspires to reach movie-level production values. I love the fact that the first series of the 13th Doctor adventures was subtle for the most part, and you might think the show had gone soft with its first female Doctor, and its climax, it delivers possibly the punchiest episode of this series yet. It's almost enough to make you think that Chris Chibnall lulled his viewership into a false sense of security just to make his impact on New Year's Day, and it's a terrific Dalek story for that. Number 6. The Power of the Doctor. Often considered the best story of the 13th Doctor era, and yes, this is a great send-off for the 13th Doctor, but it's just shy of the top 5 for me because I just prefer the other 5 stories on this list more. But the nostalgia with old faces returning is a wonderful aspect, which lifts the episode hugely. The moment when the 13th Doctor finds herself meeting manifestations of her consciousness, the Guardians of the Edge in the form of the 1st, 5th, 6th, 7th and 8th Doctors, is a truly magical addition. I am thankful to Chris Chibnall for finding this tenuous excuse to bring all those actors back, in their more aged forms. It was fantastic to see them all as they are now. They all perform their cameos in a way that's so perfect that CGI de-aging wouldn't have really done them justice. It's nice and fitting that Joe Martin gets to return as a manifestation of the fugitive Doctor as well, and it's fabulous to also get the return of former companions. Sophie Aldred as Ace is brilliant in more ways than one. Bradley Walsh pops back as Graham and works brilliantly with Ace. Tegan gets a good role in this story too, and the cameos at the end of Joe, Mel, and especially Ian were terrific to see. The emotion I felt seeing William Russell making his long overdue return as Ian Chesterton was huge. The scenes with Davison meeting back up with Tegan and Sylvester McCoy meeting back up with Ace are superbly emotional as well. The joy and warmth of these scenes just shines through. They were tremendous. Sacha Dhawan steals the show as the Master, and his plan to tarnish his greatest enemy's name and reputation is an inspired plan, and whilst the Daleks and Cybermen's inclusion wasn't entirely necessary, they were competently used enough to give our companions a threat to fight. Whilst it is overstuffed, the Power of the Doctor stands just behind The Parting of the Ways as the second best regeneration story of the revived era, and is a comforting nostalgic watch that reminds me why Doctor Who is so special to me and so many others. Number 5. Village of the Angels. Chris Chibnall and Maxine Alderton really made the Weeping Angels scary again. The major part of the episode set in the village with angels attacking people is tremendous. Professor Jericho is a wonderful guest character, beautifully acted by Kevin McNally. He was a character many fans, me included, wanted more after this story, and at least we got it. The return of Claire is very welcome too, as she is another very well acted, strong character. All the other villagers are good too. The scenes are nearly all full of quality, tension and thrills, as well as nice humour, and I think that writer Maxine Alderton is the strongest writer of the Chibnall era. She wrote some of the best material for the 13th Doctor, and it's quite clear, I think, she's most likely responsible for all the great stuff in this episode, while Chibnall writes in all the overall story arc of this bit. The exhilarating scenes with the angels are compelling, and the story is clever and fun. The cliffhanger is thrilling and powerful, the atmosphere of the Cursed Village was phenomenal as well, and the overall dark mood throughout the episode was delightful. I thought the idea of the rogue angel hiding inside a human's mind was extremely interesting, and the quantum extraction sequence with the angels taking a place out of time to hunt for someone was a compelling and frankly awesome new idea for them. Village of the Angels is many fans' favourite episode of Flux. However, that honour for me goes to number 4, War of the Sontarans. My goodness, the Sontarans came back strong. War of the Sontarans is one of the best 13th Doctor stories and is a wonderful example of how much having a focused narrative can impact an episode for the better. The battlefield was an impressive set, as was the Sontaran encampment. Sarah Powell was equally as good in this episode. The commander was also pretty solid, especially at the end, and Jodie Whittaker knocked it out of the park. This was certainly one of her strongest performances, really channeling some essential Doctor qualities. The Sontarans were back to their classic roots as brutal warriors and used exceptionally well. Their plan of slipping in while the Flux is taking over is pretty smart, and the main Sontarans that we follow are quite engaging. Their ending in Crimea was especially brutal, and 13's reaction was pitch perfect, and it's just very happy to see them used well in the modern series as opposed to comic relief. In a similar vein, the Sontaran's presence in Liverpool was good too. Dan fighting them with a wok was pretty funny, John Bishop continues to be excellent, and the introduction of his parents felt a little unnecessary, but they weren't too bad to be around. Carvanista worked a lot better for me in this episode as well, and that was the great stuff. Pretty much everything with the Sontarans worked, and whilst the Temple of Atropos was a bit of a distraction for this episode, the Sontarans and the Crimean War worked so well for me that this has to be one of my favourite episodes of the 13th Doctor era. Number 3. Rosa. Racism is a common theme in the series, but it has rarely been tackled here in such a brutal, unflinching way where the ugliness of humanity is laid bare. This is communicated through Ryan and Yaz, and make this adventure really personal for them, and allows us to connect with both characters for how they're treated. However, it was Bradley Walsh's Graham that made the greatest impact amongst all the regulars, and struggling to play his part in an important moment of history. The show hasn't tugged on many heartstrings like that in a long time, as Graham has to fight his nature to make sure something good comes out of a very unpleasant moment of humanity. It's less about holding up a person from history and more about ensuring that the right event takes place. The race against time to stop Krasko from interfering with Rosa's plot of history generates a lot of excitement. Every demeaning act that is issued made me emotional, and any piece of drama that can connect me to its characters and themes is definitely doing something right. All the regulars gel in a massively engaging way, and all 4 of them had something to offer here, but it's their group scenes that impress me the most. Rosa as an episode is a beautifully written and filmed piece of drama with plenty to say. I thought it was a truly excellent piece of Doctor Who, and the show reclaiming its ability to get us all hooked on real history. Number 2. Demons of the Punjab. This is really different, and it's so rare that I get to say that about a Doctor Who episode. The way it was shot, the pacing, the subject matter, and the focus on the intimate details over the sweeping politics of the time period. I've never seen an episode of the revived series quite like this one before. The visual of a country being torn apart violently is a powerful and a great setting for a drama. Doctor Who can never hope to capture the scale of the conflict in 45 minutes, and instead focuses on a family that are torn apart by the events taking place, and it was an inspired idea. It allows us to get intimately close to the historical sweep without ever really seeing it, and because writer Vinay Patel is an expert at getting us to care for his characters, it means we are devastated as something as pure as the faith that each individual in story has threatened to tear them apart. It also leaves room for the regulars to have some beautiful moments with the guest characters. Graham talking about why he loves travelling with the Doctor, the hen and stag party, and the wedding itself, which emotionally is an unusually multifaceted sequence for this show. Jodie Whittaker is on fire at this point, still enjoying playing the Doctor as part of an ensemble, but getting some very strong dominant moments. I particularly loved her threats to the Fajarians and how she confronted Manish at the climax. She's a contradiction of knowledge, vulnerability and governance, but all in a good way. I'd like to single out Shane Zazar, who gave an unfussy, beautiful performance as Prem. He's effortlessly likeable, but also complex and interesting, and that makes his fate all the more upsetting. by the end. How this episode manages to make the death at the climax powerful, despite the fact we have early warning of it, is really masterful. It's because of what that death represents for the country, for the characters that have met him, and for Yasmin's grandmother. Combine that with superb music and location work, Demons of the Punjab will go down as one of my favourite adventures in history. Number 1. The Haunting of Villa Diodati. Without a doubt, my favourite 13th Doctor story, an atmospheric haunted house story, a riveting continuation of this season's arc, a great character study of the Doctor, fine comic moments, regular scares, and a feeling that everything is coming together for this production team. In a series that is obsessed in having a large guest cast to make the swarm of regulars even more of a crowd, this is easily the best set of guest characters we've had this series. Maxine Alderton, in a brilliant debut script, ensures they are both faithful to history and great fun to watch. They are paired off very well with the companions who each get moments to shine. I like how the story sets out to promise a haunted house mystery, and early scenes of the Doctor and friends exploring allows the cliches to be over and done with, before the whole piece turns on its head as the Cyberman appears and becomes both an influence on Shelley's Frankenstein and a kickstart into the two-part finale. It's half-formed, it revels in its own body horror, and relentlessly on a mission to save the cyber race. This Cyberman, Ashad, is one scary brute, and it's out to complete its mission whatever the cost. Even when there's an opportunity to try and bring the humanity back in Ashad through love, whilst cleverly tying it to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the episode doubles down and shows Ashad was evil long before he was a Cyberman. The Haunting of Villa Diodati kept me on the edge of my seat throughout, thanks to the peerless direction, the twists and turns, the character interplay, but mostly for Jodie Whittaker's supreme performance, and this makes it my favourite 13th Doctor story. And, whew, that's it. We have made it through 300 televised Doctor Who stories. Thank you to everyone for joining me on this journey, and I shall see you all next time in the future. Thank you so much for joining me. Goodbye.